All right, hello everybody, and welcome to the Top Producer Show. So my name is Brandy, and this is Jeff, and the whole point of the Top Producer Show is to show you guys what it actually takes to become a top producer in network marketing. Now, all of the methods that we use in network marketing, we also use in our traditional businesses as well. So stick around, and hopefully we can find something that applies to you here too. So we have been going over the book Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, and today we are going over chapter 2, which is The Truth Hurts. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff.
So more of David Goggins' story. He basically, in the first chapter, he ends up leaving with his mom, an abusive household, both, alcohol, physically abusive, to the point where people were getting knocked out, wearing certain clothes so that way you can avoid the bruises and what you look like. As he puts it, he leaves hell, and he leaves from one crazy situation to another. His mom ends up moving them to Brazil, Indiana. Now, Brazil, Indiana, during the late 80s, early 90s, and he said, I went from being the majority to being the minority. So he ends up going to a school where basically he's like the only one there, right? His mom ends up meeting somebody, and life starts to turn around, and they're living in Brazil. This gentleman happens to be from Indianapolis, owns a contracting company. Things start going well in the relationship. As David Goggins put it, it's the closest thing that he's had a dad ever. He goes, it wasn't like, lovey-dovey, but it was like the person spent time with him, played ball with him, and kind of just was there, helping out. Unfortunately, they got a call that he ended up leaving, going home, and he got jumped and was shot and killed at his house. Now, it's so crazy. Then his, mom, he gets the call, or his grandmother gets the call, finds out that this happens. They drive over, get mom. Mom doesn't believe it. They get in the car, drive to Indianapolis, and literally walk onto a crime scene, and basically have to identify, the body, and just all kinds of insanity. From there, he's like, you see this as a kid, and after being in a traumatic situation, the trauma gets worse. He then, is going to school, and unfortunately, and I kind of remember this because this was Indiana when I was in school, David Goggins and I are about the same age, and there was an accident. 5-year-old basically got ran over by a bus. Well, David Goggins was in the bus, basically at the wheel well where it happened, got to see it. He goes, stupidly, I look back, I look to see, the accident, and now here he is with this image in his head. So he kind of goes hardcore. Go get the kitty.
Yep,
she's going to scratch through the door. He kind of goes from there, just situation after situation after situation, bad after bad after bad. And it's more bad stuff. It's death. It's undiscipline. He goes through high school trying to find himself. He goes, we end up, at one point, they're in Indianapolis. I think it was his sophomore year. He goes, my sophomore year, I end up attending a school that, is basically, I'm the majority again. He goes, I start following the hip hop culture. I start wearing the clothes. I start acting, like the hip hop culture would act. And he goes, I'm loving it. They realize that I can play basketball. He goes, the one thing that I was good at, I can play basketball. I'm taller. He starts succeeding and starts making friends. He goes, but the friends he's making is basically all wrong. So he ends up, his sophomore year, his mom comes home in the middle of the day, and there he is with, as his mom put it, 10 thugs. And she ends up picking the family up and moving back to Brazil, Indiana, realizing he's going to end up basically a statistic, right? That's kind of what he says. So from there, he gets through his junior year was a mess. He goes, here I am back in, a small town. I'm the minority again. He goes, and as a little kid, racism's there, but he doesn't actually see it. He goes, but here I am, a teenager, in the 90s, following the hip hop culture, And he's like, as he put it, he's like, in some cases where he was at in Indiana, at the school he was at, he goes, this was the first time anybody ever saw the thug for real. You know, he goes, so he played into that whole scenario. And it was really a story about finding himself, about who he was. Eventually he gets to the point where I guess his grandfather was in the Air Force. So he's like, you know what? I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the military. Well, he takes the test and fails it. So it wasn't until his senior year that he ends up looking in the mirror. And it goes from, you know, bad to worse. Trying to find yourself, trying to fit in, no accountability. And he finally kind of hits rock bottom. You know, life isn't working. He ends up skipping all this school. His mom finds him after missing, you know, almost half the year of school, or maybe it was a quarter of the year of school. And she calls him and it's like, hey, we just got a letter from the school. You've missed a quarter of classes. Your grades are bad. And you're basically going to flunk out. That's why I'm calling you. You're going to flunk out. You know, you failed. And he's like, hey, I'm going to come get that letter. She's like, there's no purpose. You've just failed. He ends up showing up anyway. Mom leaves the door open. He goes in, makes a sandwich, gets the letter from his mom, and basically this is where the turn comes. He basically goes into the bathroom the next day, takes a shower, starts shaving, and has this really heart-to-heart talk, you know, with himself, really is what it is. And he's like, you know, you're an idiot, you're a screw-up, you're the stupidest kid at school, you know, you're not going to go anywhere, you're not going to make it doing what you're doing. And it was just a really honest take of where he was at. And he looks in the mirror and he's like, who are you really? Like, is this what your potential is? Is this what you're supposed to do? You know, just because bad stuff happened to you. And it was just this, you know, kind of in your face, ugly truth. But that's what it was. It was truth. And he goes, eventually he kind of came to this idea of, he's like, nobody's coming to save you. He's like, your mom's not coming to save you. Your dad is not in the picture. Your friends aren't going to help you. He goes, if you're going to get out of this situation really comes down to you. What are you going to do? And this is what he's talking to himself. And he's like, I'm literally having this conversation with myself in the mirror. And he's like, for the first time, he's like, if you're going to do this, you're going to have to study. If you're going to do this, you're going to have to stop trying to be this, you know, thug MTV scenario, and you're going to have to get it together. And it's just wild because this like time frame is identical. And what's even crazier is I kind of had the same problem. And then his senior year, he's like, I need to claim responsibility. You and only you can put yourself in the right place right now. And then he had to decide accountability. He said, you and only you can change where you're at right now. He goes, but what it starts out with is you've got to start out with the brutal truth. And whether that's, you know, and he goes on to say, whether that's in business, he goes, if you're overeating, if you have health issues, he goes, you know you have health issues, but what you're doing is you're constantly using something called softening words. Oh, it'll be okay. It's not that bad. You know, you'll say all this to lie to yourself, to keep doing the shit you know that's horrible for you, right? So he's like, you need to quit lying to yourself just to make yourself feel good. He goes, you actually need to tell yourself the truth and the brutal truth to get yourself moving. He goes, it's okay. Now, this is also personality driven. For some people, realizing personalities, this would not work. For his personality, which is kind of my personality, which is probably why I like the book and the person, it made sense. It totally made sense. Like, because I had to get to that same point too, you know, that I was screwing up, I was getting D's and F's, and I was messing around. And then my senior year, exactly the same thing. My senior year, I'm like, if I don't fix this right now, I'm not going to get out of. He was in Brazil, Indiana. I was in Brownsburg, Indiana, in the same years. I mean, which was really crazy. I'm like, if I don't get it together right now, if I don't do this right now, I'm not going to get out of here. I'm not going to be able to leave. So that took a complete 180, and kind of similar things happened. He went, you know, in his case, he went from, you know, being the thug to, okay, let's straighten up. Let's get rid of the sagging pants. Let's get rid of the starter jacket. Let's actually wear a shirt. Let's actually, and he put it, you know, wear a belt, tuck my shirt in, look like, you know, a productive member of society is basically what he was trying to do. And what he was really trying to do is change his image. Hi, Char. He was trying to change his image. He was trying to not just fit in, but fit the part of somebody. He was trying to fit the part of somebody who was going to succeed. And he said the kitchen table became his study ground. He started running and working out. He goes, other than working out, and the same thing is true if you're going to build a business. Other than working out, other than eating right, other than going to school and coming home and studying, he goes, I didn't do anything else. I wasn't hanging out with all the people I was hanging out with before. I wasn't, just playing video games, which was kind of the thing to do back then. Just playing video games to get away from everybody. He goes, the drinking and drugs didn't interest me at that point. And he gets it together and he ends up passing the test that allows him to get into the military. My family warned me against the military. You can't go to the military. I probably should have been in the military, but didn't happen. So he said, what you need to do is call yourself out. You need to confess it. This is, I actually wrote this. You need to confess it and then possess it. Confess it means, hey, here's what I'm doing wrong. Here's how I'm screwing up. The possession part is this is me. It was my fault. I made these choices. He's like, look, I have all the excuses. I grew up in an abusive household. I grew up around alcoholism. I grew up around physical abuse. I grew up around, people who are breaking the law and running prostitution rings. I watch people die. He's like, but I've chosen this path that I'm on. I could have studied. I could have, not hung out with stupid people and gotten in trouble. I could have not stayed out all night. And, he talks about a story where he tries, him and his best friend end up staying out all night and against his grandmother's kind of wishes. And he calls the next day and says, hey, Grandma, come get me. This is his junior year. And she's like, well, you're a big kid. You stayed out all night. Walk home. Well, walking home was 10 miles. 10 miles. They were out in the country somewhere. It's Brazil, Indiana. There's nothing. So him and his friend start walking back. And he goes, here I am, me and my friend. And it just so happens that in the 90s, he was, the minority. So along comes this truck down this dirt road about 3 miles from, their place. And he basically gets confronted at gunpoint by somebody that does not like him, and calls him a bunch of racial slurs and this, that, and the other thing. Well, what ends up happening is his senior year is ever since that incident, he has avoided that road completely. He's avoided that road. And I think it's so true that we do the same thing. It doesn't have to be that major where somebody's pointing a gun at your head and yelling at you racial slurs. It could be you just had a bad experience at work, or you had a bad experience in sales, you had a bad experience in a phone call, and now all of a sudden you're avoiding that call, you're avoiding that situation. And it wasn't until his senior year that he was out running one night and he ran past that road, and he's like, I was deathly afraid of this road still. And eventually he comes back. He's like, I ran, a quarter of a mile in the other direction. Then I ran back, and I decided to run back down this road that scared me, this road that, I told myself I'd never be on again. And what he was doing is he was confronting his fear. He was like, if I can run down this road, it's not going to stop me. And, the whole point of the book, can't hurt me. He's like, I started to embrace the pain. I started to embrace the hurt. I started to embrace that fear that was stopping me from doing stuff. And he's like, anytime I saw that picture of fear, I wanted to go at it, which is very much personality driven, by the way. I wanted to go at it, confront it, and basically conquer it. So that's what he ended up doing. Crazy enough, he ended up getting chased by dogs. So that was kind of another thing. He said, but it finally got me to overcome the fear. And the dogs weren't released on it. They just happened to be out there. He's like, they were like wild dogs. And he's like, all of a sudden I got these 2 dogs chasing me. He goes, this is kind of like a 1960s movie. He goes, I'm expecting the truck to roll up and all kinds of other stuff. He had all kinds of problems at school, with racism, obviously during the late 80s, early 90s, the middle of Indiana, not a good place. Not a good place to be if that is the case. So he said, nobody likes to hear the truth. Individually, as a culture, we avoid what we need to hear most. He said, if you aren't missing out on opportunities, making a lot of money, getting evicted because of America, or as he put it, whether Donald Trump or Biden or anybody else, or because your ancestry, people who hate, certain people, because of their, race, sex, gender. He goes, if you think any of that shit is stopping you in excelling in life, he goes, I've got some news for you. The only person that's stopping you is you. The only person that's stopping you is you. He goes, you're not being held down by, and he put this, you're not being held down by chains. There's no rope attached to you. There's nobody walking around at gunpoint telling you where you have to be. He goes, you are making these choices on your own. You're deciding what to listen to. You're deciding what to look at. You're deciding what to hear. And this is why we talk in direct sales and network marketing. The number one thing you need to do is unplug your TV. The number one thing you need to do is unplug most of the social media. Here's the thing. If you want to not see this stuff, your phone has a really neat feature under cellular, and you can basically either delete certain things, or you can basically turn off all the notifications. Brandy and we don't get any notifications on news or updates. Like if the world's falling apart, somebody's going to have to call me. My mom's like, well, what happens if this happens, this happens? I'm like, I don't give a shit. I'm like, I don't care. I'm like, I'm focused on what I'm focused on. I'm not going to be distracted. And the whole purpose of the phone having the messengers on it is to distract you, is to keep you involved in what they want you looking at. Therefore, you will not have the focus to succeed. You won't. It's not possible. Here's why you absolutely know it's not possible. Lamborghini was asked in an interview, like the company, right? They had the executives. They were asked in an interview why they don't have TV commercials. And they're like, well, that's really simple. Our target market of who's going to buy a Lamborghini is not watching TV. Done. Because those people can't afford it. So that tells you right there that the television and the normal media is basically programming you where you're not going to be able to succeed. So the first thing you can do is turn it off and get away from it. He goes on to say, tell the truth about real reasons for your limitations, and you'll turn that negativity, which is real, into jet fuel. So that's kind of the idea behind this, is that brutal honesty is okay, this is who I am, but I don't want to be like this anymore. When you're brutally honest and you really say, hey, look, I don't like who I am. I don't like what I'm doing. That's the fuel to get you moving. But if you're not honest with yourself, if you're using softening words, well, I'm not that fat, I'm not that unhealthy, I'm not that depressed, I'm not that, I'm just a little bit, I'm just here. Those are all softening words, If you really, really looked at it, what are you? And I'm not telling you what you are, I'm just asking. It's okay to be cruel to yourself as long as you realize you're doing it to become better. And I think that's kind of the trick. You're not there just to beat yourself up, which a lot of people do. A lot of people just walk around, they don't need anybody trying to, hurt them, because they're hurting themselves, right? We all need thicker skin to improve in life. These changes you make will not show up instantly. Just because you make a change, as he put it, Lady Luck isn't just going to show up and just give it to you. So his senior year, when he decided to change clothes, when he decided to start studying, he goes, it wasn't like everything changed right away. He goes, but within a year's time, he was able to pass this test. He was able to get out of Brazil, Indiana. He was able to get into the military. He goes, I brainwashed myself into craving discomfort. He goes, because what he realized is the discomfort was where success was. And that's so true. So many people are reading these books that are like, only do what you love. Well, if you only did what you love, you'd be naked in a beanbag chair eating Fritos, right? I mean, that's where you'd be, because that's easy. That's simple. I just want to sit around and watch movies all day in the air conditioning, which a lot of America is doing right now. But if you want success, you have to do what's uncomfortable, not what's comfortable. Because if you just did what's comfortable, you're going to end up like all the other people. If you want to do what's uncomfortable, the reason, some of these super successful people pop up is because they're doing stuff that nobody would do. Nobody sleeps in their office, but the super successful people, and I'm not saying you're supposed to sleep in your office. Nobody drives the miles that some of the network marketers drove in the past. Now we have the internet, and now we're sitting at home. What's crazy is now we could actually build at 10 times the speed, 10 times bigger than the biggest people who have ever built in network marketing. But what are we doing? We're lazy because it's so easy. But what he says is, I brainwashed myself into craving discomfort. Learning through transcription, memorization, and recall. So everybody learns differently. This was something they learned from his teacher. He's like, everybody learns differently, so you have to figure out what is your method of learning. He goes, most people's method of learning is I'm going to sit and watch, and then I'm going to go home and read, and I'm good. He goes, that didn't work for me. Well, this is so crazy, because this is exactly what I had to do. He goes, I had to learn through transcription. I would get the lesson, and I would have to come home, and I'd have to physically write it. Then I'd have to write it again. So he was taking the chapters of all the books, whether it was history or English or whatever, and he was writing them out, and then writing them again, and then writing them out, and then writing them again to be able to pass these tests. So transcription turned into memorization, and memorization turned into recall. The best revenge is massive success, and that's kind of where he was at. He's like, I'm going to show all these people. And some of you need to be in that situation where you're going to show all these people that you said it's not going to work or can't happen or whatever. He's like, I'm going to show you. He's like, what you need to start out with, he's like, I don't care if it's a Post-it note. I don't care if it's, a marker on a mirror. He goes, but what you need to start doing is need to start writing out your accountability. What are you going to be accountable to? What do you need to get done? He goes, you need to write out all your insecurities. And I mean, he was brutal about, he's like, if you're fat, write down your fat. If you're, out of shape, if you're unhealthy, write it down. He goes, be brutally honest with yourself. Where are you really? How old are you? How much longer do you plan on working? How much money do you have saved? What do you have? I mean, he was like, you need to write it all out. Where are you really? Quit using these softening words where I'll get to it later. And this, he's like, you're not going to get to it. You're not going to get to it. You haven't gotten to it till now. You're not going to get to it until you become brutally honest. Write out your insecurities. Write out all your dreams. Write out all your goals. He goes, and then post it and or write it down where you have to look at it every single day. And you need to have this talk with yourself. Are you going to be the person that keeps going down the same path, or are you going to change? Are you going to be somebody different? Are you going to be somebody better? He went on to say, he goes, every single person has greatness inside them. Every single person has great. I just heard Jay-Z talk about this too. He goes, everybody has a God-given talent. He goes, what most people do is they don't research, they don't look for that talent. Because they don't find that talent, they don't feel like they're successful, and they're told that they don't have the talent, so they don't even look for it. Which is scary. So he said, you need to be truthful with where you're at and what you need to do step by step to achieve your goal. Sometimes that takes an outside person. Sometimes that takes a mentor. Sometimes that takes a coach. That's why we started the coaching program, because so many people, I've read so many books where like, you need to do a self-evaluation. Well, if you're shitty at doing evaluations, what is that evaluation going to do for you? If you've been lying to yourself the whole time and you're good at lying to yourself, how is a self-evaluation going to get you there? It's not. You don't know what to do.
Yep. Or the questions to ask yourself, which is the bigger one. And people do, if you're trying to go somewhere you've never been, you kind of need somebody who's been there or can at least show you the way to help you ask yourself. That's why coaches are great. They ask you the questions so you could kind of like, you can answer your own questions, but they're good at asking them for you that you didn't even know that you needed to be asking.
Yeah, Tony Robbins said you can take decades and turn them into days by having the right coach and the right person, right? So whatever your goal is, he said you need to hold yourself accountable to it. And he says self-improvement takes dedication and self-discipline. And if you know anything about the rest of the story, this is the point where he starts turning it around and he starts using this dedication and this self-discipline and this fear to his advantage. And that's kind of what the best do. If you look at the best people, they take their fear, they take their insecurity, they take their screw-ups, and they actually turn that into fuel and use it, whether it's in a story or whether it's just the motivation to move forward, is every single day they start working on chipping away at this bad person that they were and making themselves a good person. But you have to find those habits that make you a good person. If you've never been around the right people, just like if you've never been around people to build a business, you're not going to self-evaluate and figure out the good things to do versus the bad things unless you take a lifetime. Why not go to a seminar? Why not find a coach? Why not find a mentor that can actually take you from decades of learning into days of learning? Then you can actually succeed. That's how it works. So that was chapter 2. The book is really good so far. Very descriptive. He holds nothing back, and the language is just like as if, I mean, if you've heard his any of his interviews, he basically says, he's like, look, if you're concerned about language, I'm not the person to bring on your podcast. If you're concerned about language, you're not the person that I should be speaking to. Mm-hmm. So that's what I got.
All right. So we are here Monday through Friday at noon. And if you guys, so we have a company called My Leadership Network. And what we found is a lot of people in network marketing struggle with who are they going to go talk to? Where are they going to go find people to talk to? And how do they talk to them? So we actually have a system where we show people how to do that in their companies to then be able to build up their business. If that is something that you are interested in, you can go to joinmyleadershipnetwork.com. You don't have to buy anything. You could just join the community and see if there's a way that we can help you. So with that, that is what we have for you guys today, and we will see you tomorrow.